Hi, I'm Steve Clemons, and I have a question. Is Iran's footprint across the Middle East shrinking? Let's get to the bottom line. In the decades since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, the world has witnessed a muscular Iran that wanted to export its ideals and spread them around the region and around the world. Iran has dominated politics in 4 Arab countries for years: Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. But more recently, it seems that things are changing. So are we witnessing an Iran 2.0 that is strategically contracted from its previous regional ambitions? Today, we're talking with Iranian-American political scientist Vali Nasr, professor of international relations at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, here on this special edition of the show at the Doha Forum in Qatar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Listen, over the last year, I'd just love to get your sense of the Middle East and Iran's place in it, because it seems to me as if Israel and the United States have been reshaping the region in really profound ways. Iran used to seem to be riding high in a lot of the countries. How do you see it now?
You're absolutely right. When the October 7th attacks happened, the very first year it looked like Iran and its axis of resistance had really cornered Israel, turned the tables on it, and looked very strong in the region. And then the tide of war changed. First of all, Gaza was decimated in many ways, and then Hezbollah found itself in a corner because it had stipulated that it needed a ceasefire in Gaza before it would agree to a ceasefire in Lebanon. And when that didn't happen, then Israel pulled off an intelligence coup of killing Nasrallah, the whole pager attack, and then decimating the leadership of Hezbollah as well. And then in the past week, we've seen the unraveling of Syria. So at least the Iran strategy of using Lebanon as a wedge against Israel is no longer operational. And now that it loses Syria as well, it means that for now its hand is cut off of Levant, at least the way in which it was controlling Syria and Lebanon, and that was a bridge with Iraq and Iran. That kind of Shia crescent is now broken. Now, time will tell whether Iran can rebuild.
I mean, it's a staggering change in fortunes, staggering change in the chessboard. And I think a couple of the key things of the topography is watching the Biden administration, American President Joe Biden, kind of trying to calm down Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, trying to demonstrate restraint. It seemed like the only one that seemed to be restraining themselves at Biden's instruction was Iran. And Israel kept going right through the comments of the White House and proceeding it. I mean, is Bibi Netanyahu really the unbelievable winner?
Well, we shall see, because this can also be like 1982. At the beginning, Israel went into Lebanon, expelled PLO, put siege to Beirut. It looked like an absolute victor. And then, we ended up with Hezbollah, and then, it took a number of years, but Israel was forced out of Lebanon by Hezbollah by year 2000. So it also depends on what Israel does with this. But there's no question that Iran and Hezbollah were not prepared with the kind of ferocity that Israel exercised in Lebanon, in Gaza. And then they also were caught off guard by the intelligence coup that Israel had in Lebanon. Now, Iran would be an absolute loser if Israel would actually use this moment to do something positive in Lebanon and Syria and Gaza. But if it doesn't, Iran could survive to fight another day.
Oh, what do you think? I mean, you think they're going to do something positive? I mean, is that your instinct?
No, because you see, the Iranians see this as a long war. They've lost the battle. They haven't lost the war. And Israel, on the other hand, has won a massive battle in a very decisive way, has surprised everybody. But it might misread the moment and try to overreach. So I think the Iranian calculation is that the old model of the way they managed Israel and the Levant is gone. But they
wiped out.
It's wiped out, exactly.
Right. It's not just gone; like it's really, down to the foundation.
We have to also be careful not to overread into it.
No, but I want to ask about this, because I may be wrong in this assessment. But again, Iran's motivations and views so much better than I do. But it seemed to me like Iran was a little cautious and careful about wanting to own the Gaza situation too much.
Absolutely. Iran
and
actually
I'm
was
really interested in the fact that you
Iran
had the
was not
Houthis,
interested.
you had Hezbollah, you had...
No, Iran, Iran
yeah.
was not sold on the idea that they should plunge into Gaza. I mean, they had helped arm and
Israel
train.
acted like they had plunged into
Well, that's
Gaza.
because also Hezbollah actually drove this issue, not Tehran. Nasrallah was the one who, for reasons of his own view that as a Shia organization, they had to be on the side of the Palestinians in order to be accepted by the larger Arab world, from October 8th, started joining the battle and then would not pull out unless there was a ceasefire in Gaza. This was not a decision that was made in Tehran. This was a decision that was made in Beirut. I mean, we are also looking at the old picture. In many ways, Hassan Nasrallah became far more important after Soleimani, Americans killed Soleimani. In many ways, he was the successor to Soleimani. And I think the Iranians now rue the fact that they allowed that to happen. Iranians all along favored that Hezbollah accept a ceasefire and not make it conditional on Sinwar, because they saw that, you know, this is going in the wrong direction. In fact, when Israel killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, Iran did not react to the killing of Haniyeh at that time in the hope that the Biden administration was just about to get a ceasefire in Gaza, which would then bring a ceasefire to Lebanon. So in a way, you know, so it's important to note that you know, it is not like Tehran was micromanaging this. It's a case of the tail wagging the dog a bit. And so that Iran is not caught with the consequences. You're absolutely right. Where I'm saying it's not as catastrophic as one would say is Hezbollah has been downgraded to such an extent that it's not a threat to Israel, but it is strong enough to remain a power in Lebanon. If Israel occupies South Lebanon, if it, you know, you have settlers showing up, you know, up to the Litani River and trying to claim land, then, you know, we'll be in a very different situation. And then Israel basically could create the circumstances for a next Hezbollah to emerge.
Vali, I'm trying to understand sort of a tale of two Israels. Is it a tale of incompetence followed by competence, or was this a broader plan?
No, Israel's intelligence is hugely competent. But first of all, they probably didn't take the Palestinians and Hamas seriously. And it's always the danger if you don't respect your enemy and you also become too confident in yourself. That's actually the danger that Israel may be facing now, that they may underestimate Hezbollah, underestimate Iran, think that we've slapped them around enough and now they're too weak, we've devastated them. That's a danger. So they were not paying attention. They didn't take Hamas seriously. But where they had their attention, which is on Iran and on Hezbollah, they proved to be extremely competent. But why I think this moment should not be overread? You know, everything that Israel has done so far, one thing it has not managed to do is to restore the sense of confidence that its people had on October 6, 2023, when they thought that they're 100% immune from Palestinians and that this Iron Dome is impenetrable. And yes, Bibi Netanyahu has devastated Lebanon, has hit Iran, but there's enough missiles have penetrated Israel's Iron Dome that even for Israeli population, this is a different game.
So do you think deterrence has been reestablished?
No, it hasn't been reestablished, but in a sense that Iran is weaker than Israel when it comes to missiles, etc. But we're now entering a period of arms race between missile defense and Iranian missiles. Iranians were defeated intelligence-wise. Hezbollah was defeated intelligence-wise. They will try to rebuild their intelligence. They will try to, you know, completely do it again to plug all the Israeli penetration. They understood that Iran now understands that, okay, if there's no Hezbollah and there's no Syria, the only deterrence they have is their missiles and their drones and potentially a nuclear umbrella, which would make them immune. So we're entering into another phase. So Israel's success in Lebanon and Syria essentially will change. We now go to stage 2, or you're going out to the 2.0 version of this rivalry. But Iranians have taken enough from this to also sense that Israel does have holes. Israel was vulnerable in October 7th. Israel, as I said, for instance, Israel could not defend without American support all of the missiles. And so they're going to play with these things. And then Israel also has to plug these things.
Vali, you know Washington, D.C. at least as well as you know, if
No,
not better
not as
than
well
Iran.
as you do, but...
But I'm really interested in a fundamental question. And that is, did the United States want what we've seen transpire in the region? Did it want it consciously and deliberately while it pretended not to? While it was pretending to caution restraint? While it was trying to contain Netanyahu? While after it saw, over 40,000 people killed in Gaza, many women and children, that it wanted a different outcome? And I'm just wondering if there was sort of a two-level game where, one, it was trying to show restraint, but in fact, now you see the United States and Amos Hochstein and other negotiators for President Biden kind of taking credit and being pleased with the outcome.
I don't think they had planned it. First of all, they were completely caught off guard on October 7th. Their theory of the Middle East was that peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia was imminent. They had a secret deal with Iran to keep things
Jake
calm.
Sullivan had said things had never,
Exactly.
had not been this stable in decades.
Exactly. And from October 7th onwards, they were playing catch up with an Israeli policy that they continuously were trying to restrain, and then they had to acknowledge and go further. So Israel would hit the Iranian consulate in Damascus. The United States would spend 2 weeks trying to persuade Iran not to react. Then there was a killing of Haniya in Tehran. They would spend a lot of back channel to convince Iran not to react. And it was on and on. So when Israel would do something and then, okay, the sky didn't fall, they would take credit for it. But it's not like they know where the Middle East is going. Like this Middle East that they are handing over to the Trump administration, still the floor from it may fall. As we are looking, they left Israel in a position that is virtually depopulated Gaza, may expel the population from there. For the first time, the issue of annexation of the West Bank is on the table. Our Arab allies are sort of out of their comfort zone, to put it very mildly, and none of them are happy with this scenario. The United States has come across in the region as weak, as without having a plan, and unable to impose order on the region the way they used to do in the past, whether it was a good order, bad order, being Bush, Clinton, Reagan, they always ordered to sort of say...
So this has been a cost to U.S. standing,
it
at
is
least
a cost
in terms
to
of
us.
perception.
Anybody sitting around the world watching this would say, okay, Israel can claim that we did it all right, but not the United States. And the espoused view of the United States from the beginning was that you should stop the carnage in Gaza, you should not be going into the West Bank, you should not invade Lebanon, you should not poke the bear in Iran. And Bibi did all of these things. And just because the sky hasn't fallen does not mean that this war that started in October 7th is still not going to end up in a catastrophe. I think exactly because the most important part of this war, which is the Palestinian issue in Gaza and West Bank, is not solved, and actually the worst may yet happen, which is the expulsion of population, the whole Middle East could crumble as a consequence of that. I mean, the idea that you might actually really witness gradually 2 million Palestinians pushed out, or that the West Bank may go in the direction of
which could
annexation.
Destabilize Jordan, could destabilize Egypt,
Saudi Arabia.
Right.
It may change the whole, this picture that you mentioned in Lebanon, Syria, this may all change in a way.
To be candid, I kind of thought with the axis of resistance of Iran, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, as being a new axis of resistance of Iran, Russia, North Korea, and China cooperating on these conflicts. But there seem to be new tensions even there because of what's happening in Syria. Do you agree?
I agree. But you see, the problem is that so far the U.S. policy is so aggressive with all three of them at the same time, particularly economic sanctions.
So it can't split them?
No. The forces of keeping them together is bigger than the forces of splitting them. The U.S. does not have a nuanced policy of saying, first of all, what's the lowest hanging fruit in this three? And what is the biggest threat in these three? And then, first of all, like you said, okay, Iran has been weakened. Maybe this is a time, actually, for the United States to actually seriously engage Iran in negotiations and actually begin to pull it away from Russia and China, because after all, those are the much bigger global powers that the United States has to deal with. And then how do we pull Russia away from China? And the way the US uses sanctions against all of them at the same time. I mean, Trump's answer to BRICS is, I'm going to put 100% tariff on all of you. Right. His answer should be, let me see who I can pull out of the BRICS. Who can I bribe to bring out of the BRICS so that I can isolate China? I mean, both Biden and Trump say that China is America's biggest challenge. If that's true, Iran is not, and then first Iran, then Russia are not existential threats to the United States. You have to find a way to peel them away and basically isolate China. So yes, I do think what you're saying is feasible. And if we were in that sort of a Kissingerian moment in American foreign policy, he would think that way. But we sort of have got ourselves into this position that we can take all of these enemies all at once with the same tools, the result of which is we're actually encouraging the emergence of a Eurasian landmass, which goes from Russia to China and south to the Gulf, which is much bigger than Iran alone, or Russia alone, or China alone.
Did Joe Biden make a terrible mistake of not really reaching out and trying to consolidate something with them earlier before the Trump administration came in? Was that a real blunder?
Well, his first blunder was that he didn't negotiate something with them when he first became president. And still this crew was still in office back in 2020. He thought, well, Trump's maximum pressure is working, just leave it be. I don't want to deal with Iran. And the result was that hardliners came to power. Iran went to 60% enrichment. It became a much bigger headache. And then this fellow came to power, and you're right, the supreme leader is behind him. And again, he didn't want to deal with them. But the reality is that, look, when we say reformist in Iran, it's almost like we expect some kind of a glasnost opening in Iran. Let's not be that hopeful. All you need is a government in Iran, or an order in Iran, that is pragmatic enough to want to sign a ceasefire deal with the United States on the nuclear issue, regional issue, that they would have to get some benefit on it, but it would give them enough incentive to move away from Russia and China. And that's possible. I think exactly because Iran's been weakened, it is open to that. So not only the supreme leader brought this president, brought this team of diplomats that negotiated the nuclear deal back to power, they have been saying repeatedly in the past few weeks that they are interested in talking to the Trump administration. So we'll see whether Trump will bite, but we're not going to get to a peace deal with Iran, total. But we can actually arrive at a situation where, you arrive, as I said, on a nuclear and a regional ceasefire with Iran that lowers the temperature in the region, lowers the degree of nervousness in the Gulf, which really doesn't want war because their whole economic business models are based on peace, and also allows the region to sort of take its breath. And it's better for the United States because then it can focus on China and on Russia.
I guess just finally, a two-part question. I've been struck over the many years I've been watching this at how consistent the misalignments are between the United States in particular and Iran. That when Iran was ready to do a deal or a grand bargain, the United States gave them a cold shoulder. When the United States was more of a negotiating mode, Iran was in a difficult space. And so I'm just sort of interested, as you sort of look forward, is there any way that you don't end up in the worst box, if we're talking about game theory, where Iran just has to get a nuclear weapon, has to develop that capacity because it's seen the deterioration of its situation so much? Is that where you think we'll end up? And then next to that, how do you think the Saudis are looking at this whole scene?
So I think they're not there yet. They still are looking at their nuclear program as a bargaining chip in order to get somewhere with the United States. I actually am not as unhopeful as maybe I should be, for the reason that there were two forces in the Middle East which did not want a breakthrough between Iran and the United States. So one was the Gulf Arab countries, and one was Israel. And in fact, these Gulf Arab countries allied with Israel in order to undermine the nuclear deal in Washington after it was signed. And so Trump came out. Now, at least the Gulf Arab countries, part of it, don't want to play that game anymore. They've normalized relations with Iran, opened embassies, are meeting with them. So that only leaves Israel, which is not favorable to an U.S.-Iran nuclear deal. Now, it's for the United States to assert what is its interest while also protecting Israel's interest. But if this doesn't go the right way, I mean, Iran at some point will decide to go nuclear, but it's not going to do it right away because it's not going to build a nuclear program that we can bomb that easily. I mean, they've learned their lesson from bunker busters here. So it's not going to be in the next 2 weeks where they're not ready. But they may go in that direction because we also have to know that we say all of Iran's regional policies have been some kind of a hegemonic aggrandizement. But in reality, Iran is also an insecure state. Everything they're doing in this region is really to protect themselves. They wanted Hezbollah because they wanted to keep Israel busy on its own borders. They wanted Iraqi militias because they wanted to keep the United States out of Iraq. And then, this thing got out of control. Now, if they don't have those ways of protecting themselves, they will look at nuclear capability. But I'm still hopeful that there is an element there. Now, with Saudis, you mentioned, I think, the Saudis don't want Iran to have nuclear capability. They don't want Iran to be a regional hegemon. They want to be treated as a power equal to Turkey, Iran, and Israel. They want to be seen as a great regional power. But their theory of managing Iran has changed. That, look, they're too big. They're about just across the Gulf from you. There's no Iron Dome that's going to protect them from you. They already attacked your oil facilities in 2020, and Trump did not come to your defense. So the idea of trying to egg the United States into a fight with Iran is actually self-defeating, particularly now that you're investing in Vision 2030 and you want all of these world investments. You don't want missiles flying back and forth. You want stability. And so maybe if you talk to Iran, engage with Iran, there's incentive for Iran to be positive. And it has worked because regardless of what they say, the Houthis have not been shooting missiles at Iran since Iran and Saudi Arabia signed that deal in Beijing. They're shooting at the Red Sea. They're a problem for the Brits. They're a problem for the Americans. They're a problem for everybody other than Saudi Arabia and UAE. So they now have a different theory of how do you manage Iran. It's not that they're in love with Iran or are not afraid of Iran, but they've moved past that. So, but if Iran goes nuclear, if the war comes to the Gulf, then they have to reassess what they do.
What a change in the chessboard. Vali Nasr, professor at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So what's the bottom line? Every nation has its ups and downs, especially if your history goes back thousands of years. For instance, China had a downward swing of about 300 years, and now it's clearly swinging back big time. Iran was on an upswing for decades now, and it had direct influence in at least 4 other nations, powerful proxies, and it was able to pressure Israel and other countries. But that bubble has just burst for now. Iran looks like it's contracting, and in this world, power is perception. Iran 2.0 may adopt more pragmatic domestic policies and a more humble foreign policy. It may find better relations with its Muslim rivals, even with Israel and even the United States. At least for now. And that's the bottom line.